Hey everyone, it's so great to be here. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Today I'm going to talk about what's coming next in AI and how that is going to affect us all as individuals, citizens, and creatives. Now, I've been writing about AI for 5 years, and we're clearly in the year 2 of the generative AI boom. And we're seeing in real time how this technology is changing every field, including the creative sector. But with that shift comes a whole slew of new problems. Now, I'm going to talk about some of them, but I promise it's not going to be all doom and gloom. I'm also going to give us some hope on how to prepare for this coming AI age. So let's start with the problems. And a lot of them have to do with this guy. Some of you may have heard of the story of the Mechanical Turk. The Mechanical Turk, it was a chess-playing machine built in 1770 to impress an Austrian empress. It was so good at playing chess, people thought it had this supernatural ability, that it was magic. It took on opponents such as Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon Bonaparte and won. In reality, this machine had space underneath it for a human to crawl underneath and control it. This hoax was eventually exposed by journalists, but it went on for 84 years. That's 3 generations. And history is rich with examples of people trying to breathe life into inanimate objects or sell hacks and tricks as magic. And as humans, we also have this very natural tendency to believe computers are correct, even when they're not. You've probably heard of death by GPS, or associate human-like characteristics to inanimate objects, such as chatbots. And today's hype cycle has a lot of that going on. Sure, some AI systems are impressive, but I'm sure you've all had this experience that when you prod and play with them a bit more, you see how quickly they glitch and break and make things up. And this raises some questions about whether we should be trusting them in the first place. AI is not just some neat productivity tool. AI itself is one of the greatest stories of our time. It's a story about money, power, and influence, about who gets to build these models, whose data they're using, and who stands to benefit. We're already seeing strong signs that the current practices in the field are consolidating power in the hands of just a couple of players, and those monopolies hurt us all. Tech companies also love to claim their AI models can do much more than they actually can. And what really keeps me up at night is thinking about how these systems are being rushed to market because tech companies want to make money when they're not ready, and all the havoc and chaos that can cause in the very near future. But you know what? When people think about harms and risks related to AI, they think about this guy. There's been a lot of talk about existential risk, about the singularity, about AI and killer robots, and maybe AI will one day hijack missile systems or bioweapons. But that's still very much strongly in the science fiction category. People often ask me how worried they should be about AI, and I say, very, but not because of this. There's a lot of hype in AI, and that often means that this hype masks the harms the technology poses us right now. One of the most important things I wish people really understood is that AI is not neutral. It reflects the values and the biases and the thinking of the people that built it. And right now, that's a lot of white dudes in Silicon Valley. To give you a concrete example, a couple of years ago, I went on this viral AI avatar app called Lensa. Maybe some of you remember this. It was an app where you uploaded a selfie of yourself, and it used an AI model to create these cool avatars. I saw my friends get images of themselves as astronauts or doctors or fantasy warriors or techno DJs, and I thought, how fun. I want to do that. How wrong I was. These are the images I got. All I got was nudes. Out of 100 images I generated, 16 were topless, 14 were in extremely skimpy clothes, and the rest were modeled on generic Asian women and video game characters and anime. So I got mad, and I wrote this story. Now, the fact that my avatars were so hypersexualized isn't really a surprise when you know how these models work. Lensa uses Stable Diffusion, which is trained on this massive open-source data set that's compiled of billions and billions of images that has been scraped from the internet. And because the internet is a pretty toxic place, full of racist and sexist stereotypes, those are also reflected in the model. I actually searched the Stable Diffusion data set, and when you search Asian, all you get is women in porn. So this kind of bias leads to women being sexualized by AI systems, whether they want to or not. But it also leads to really concrete harm. In the US, the police use facial recognition systems that haven't been trained on black or brown faces and thus don't recognize them. And this has led to lots of wrongful arrests of innocent people. But it's not just the training data that is to blame. The companies building and using these models, they have the power to choose how they collect their data and whether they mitigate against these biases or not. And as well as resulting in bias, this indiscriminate scraping of data is at the heart of one of the biggest fights in AI right now between artists and tech companies. And I don't need to tell a room full of creatives how hard it is in the industry right now. Artists are worried that this practice will lead to their work being stolen without compensation and affect their livelihoods. Tech companies argue anything on the free internet is free game. So when Stable Diffusion first came out in 2022, I wrote a story about Greg Gruchowski, who is a Polish digital artist who uses classical techniques to create these cool fantasy landscapes. But suddenly he found himself as one of the most popular AI prompts, even more popular than Picasso or Monet. And that's because he'd uploaded a lot of his work onto a popular art platform, and it had been scraped. So suddenly he found himself people generating images that looked a lot like him, but weren't him, but were these cheap AI copycats that were drowning out his original work. It will likely take years until we have a clear-cut solution and legal court cases to go through to this problem. And until courts and regulators catch up, big tech companies will continue scraping our data in whatever way they can. You might have noticed recently Meta updated its generative AI policy. And if you've ever posted anything on Meta's platforms, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Meta can now use that to train its models. Meta knows it is sitting on a gold mine of high-quality, human-created training data, and it can use that to get more money, power, and influence. And if you read the fine print, even if you aren't on any of these platforms, if someone posts something of you on them, Meta can still scrape you. And this scale of scraping also inevitably leads to our personal data ending up in these AI models. So a couple of years ago, I wanted to know, what does GPT-3 know about me? I managed to get information about me and our editor-in-chief. And this problem will get bigger as these models get bigger and they have more data. Experts I spoke to have called this a ticking time bomb for AI, for online privacy. Since the story came out, researchers have managed to extract email addresses, phone numbers, as well as home addresses. And you can imagine the kind of security threat this poses if hackers would gain access to this data. Even our faces are not safe. Now, I wanted to show you this. This is an AI avatar I created using technology by a startup called Synthesia, and this represents the cutting edge of where deepfakes are going now. Let's play it.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles.
Now, what's happening under the hood here is that a generative AI model is helping this avatar match the sentiment and micro-expressions and tone of voice to the text. But if you didn't know better, you'd think this was a recording of me doing Shakespeare kind of badly. And I had to go to a studio to do this. That's pretty unusual. The vast majority of deepfakes are non-consensual. They've been plucked off social media. These days, one image that you've posted is enough to create something pretty passable. And this also poses extremely high risks to anyone who's worried about non-consensual deepfake porn, for example, or revenge porn. But this video, this experiment, raised some bigger questions for me. Our information landscape is being polluted by these AI-generated content, and it's getting harder and harder to know what's real and what's not. And that's becoming an increasingly big problem in this big election year, as people have varying degrees of AI literacy. We are simply not ready for what is coming. If people become too skeptical of what they see, they might not believe anything at all. And politicians, for example, might use this trust vacuum to take advantage and claim incriminating images of them are AI-generated or fake. And we're seeing plenty of real-life examples of AI causing harm today. In Germany earlier this year, a viral deepfake video of Olaf Scholz went viral where he said he was banning the AfD party. In the Netherlands, which I think is one of the most shocking cases I've ever heard of, the Dutch tax authority used an algorithm to try and weed out benefits fraud. And child benefits fraud. And they started penalizing families who they thought were suspected, who the algorithm suspected of being fraudsters. And families, tens of thousands of families, found they owed the tax authority 10,000, 30,000, 100,000 euros on a mere suspicion. This led to people mainly of lower socioeconomic classes or immigrant backgrounds to real existential harm. People got divorced, committed suicide. Over 1,000 children were taken into foster care. In Spain, there was a public outcry just earlier this year when viral, non-consensual deepfake nudes of underage girls were spread online. So I don't mean to raise your blood pressure or give you anxiety, but if I'm being real with you, there's a lot of problems and not a lot of solutions. But I do hope creative communities like yourself can be part of that solution. Here's how I think we can do that and how to survive this AI age. Number one is AI literacy. Of course, you need to know how these models work, but also you have to understand how they work, not just how to use them. We've talked a lot about bias today, but if you understand that language models are just systems that predict the next likely word in a sentence and aren't really based on facts, just statistics, that'll give you a lot more power and understanding of how to use these models. Number two is know your rights. If you're someone who's interested in privacy or intellectual property, know that soon you can opt out. Meta already allows people to opt out of its online scraping thanks to the AI Act, which is now coming into force. And likely all other big tech companies are going to have to comply with it as well. The AI Act also sets up a new AI office, which allows anyone who thinks they're being harmed by an algorithm the right to complain. And thirdly, protect yourself. Now, anything you see online, you've lost control of that. But anything you put online from now on, you have some choices. Two new tools created by researchers at the University of Chicago allow artists and creatives to protect themselves from non-consensual AI scraping. The first one, Glaze, adds a sort of invisible mask on top of your images that prevents an AI from copying your personal style. It works by adding these subtle changes to the pixels so that when an AI model reads it, it comes out all weird. You can also choose where you post your stuff. There's a new art sharing platform on social media that just launched in the App Store this week called Kara, and it filters out AI-generated content from its feed. It's also integrated with Glaze, so you can use that protection when you upload it on the platform. But you should probably do it with anything you upload anyway. And if you're feeling extra spicy, you can use a tool called Nightshade, which is a data poisoning attack. It works in a similar way to Glaze, where you add an invisible layer, but it poisons the AI model. So when your image gets scraped, you can see that images of dogs become cats or hats become cakes, and it's incredibly potent. Only 300 samples are enough to really permanently damage the model. Tech companies would have to painstakingly and manually go through every single image in their billion-image dataset to remove this poison. So now the good news is, it's still early days, and we have the power to change things. One of the most persistent myths I've heard is that AI is inevitable, that we have to accept these exploitative practices and biases as a price to pay for progress. That's not true. Ultimately, I hope we can have a more healthy relationship with the technology and use it as a tool to boost our creativity. But we need to understand the power dynamics at play so that we can push back against the most messed up and exploitative ways the tech is being built and used right now. That will allow us to make conscious choices about how we use that technology and make it work for us, not against us. Thank you.